The night stretched quiet and endless over the countryside. The air was cool, carrying the smell of earth and cut grass. Far from the city, where noise never truly ended, here the silence was alive. Crickets chirped, owls hooted, and the wind whispered between the tall stalks of corn. The stars above were sharp and clear, scattered across the black sky like 1,000 little fires. Ethan walked slowly along the dirt path near his family's barn. His hands were in his pockets, his boots pressing soft marks into the soil. He wasn't out here for any special reason. It had just become a habit. Every night after long hours of work on the farm, after fixing old machines and caring for the animals, he would take a walk. It helped him breathe. It helped him think. Life hadn't been easy for him since his father passed away. The farm used to feel alive when his father was there, always fixing something, always talking, always making plans. Now the land felt heavier, like it was demanding more from Ethan than he could give. His mother did what she could, but she was tired too. His sister had left for the city years ago, so most nights it was just him, the barn, and the silence. He tilted his head back, staring at the stars. His father used to tell him stories about them when he was a boy. Each light up there is another sun, his father had said. And who knows, maybe someone is looking back at us. Ethan had laughed at the idea back then, but tonight the thought lingered. That was when the sky ripped apart. At first he thought it was just a shooting star, brighter than the others. But then it grew. It screamed across the heavens, leaving a burning trail of fire and light. The sound came a moment later, a roaring, tearing noise that shook his chest. The ground trembled under his boots as the blazing object vanished into the woods on the far side of the hill. Ethan froze, his mouth dry, his heartbeat wild. He had never seen anything like it. This was no plane, no helicopter, no meteor. It was something else. Smoke began to rise above the trees, faint but steady. Against all reason, Ethan started running. His legs carried him over the field, through the tall grass, down the slope, and into the dark line of woods. Branches scratched against his arms, and roots tried to trip him, but he didn't stop. His mind screamed at him to turn back, to call someone, to do anything except head toward the fire. But his heart pulled him forward. Something about the crash felt important. As he neared the site, the glow grew brighter, flickering through the trees like an angry lantern. The smell of burning metal filled his nose, sharp and unnatural. And then he saw it. Nestled between the trees lay something that could never belong to Earth. A vessel, smooth and curved, silver and glowing faintly like it was alive. Its surface was cracked, broken open in places, with strange symbols carved into its hull that pulsed faintly with dying light. Sparks hissed and leapt from torn panels. Smoke drifted upward, curling against the branches above. Ethan's breath caught. This was not human. His legs trembled, but he stepped closer anyway. The ship, if that's what it was, looked wounded, as if it had fallen from the stars themselves. The sight alone was enough to make his chest tighten with awe and fear. Then, movement. From the broken edge of the vessel, a figure stumbled out. Small, slender, and so completely unlike anything he had ever seen. She looked almost human at first glance, but not quite. Her skin shimmered faintly in the light, not pale, not dark, but something otherworldly, like the surface of moonstone. Her hair was long, flowing, catching the glow of the wreck as if each strand carried its own light. But her eyes were what struck him deepest. They were large, glowing softly, filled with fear and pain. She pressed a hand to her side, her movements shaky, unsteady. Her clothes were torn, strange fabric that shimmered like water yet clung tightly to her body. Ethan's breath hitched. His mind raced. This was real. This was someone from the stars. The girl looked at him suddenly, and for a moment their gazes locked. Time seemed to stop. The world around them, the smoke, the fire, the night, all faded into silence. Her lips parted. Her voice was soft, trembling, broken as if the words themselves were difficult for her to form. "Please, help my ship." The words were awkward, accented, but clear enough for him to understand. Ethan's heart hammered. A dozen thoughts collided in his mind. He should run. He should call someone. He should be terrified. And yet, standing there, looking into her desperate eyes, all he felt was a strange pull, something deep and unexplainable. He swallowed hard. I'll help," he whispered, his voice rough. The girl blinked, her glowing eyes softening just slightly, like she had not expected kindness from him. Ethan took a step closer. He could see her shaking now, her small frame trembling with exhaustion or pain. The wreck behind her hissed and sparked, threatening to collapse on itself. Slowly, carefully, he reached out his hand. For a moment she hesitated, staring at it with uncertainty. Then, almost as if it cost her everything, she placed her delicate hand into his. Her skin was cool, almost too cool, and faintly glowing. The touch sent a shock through him, not of fear, but of connection. And under that star-filled sky, beside a broken starship, Ethan realized his life had just changed forever. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know why she had fallen here or what would come next. But he knew one thing. He could not walk away. The woods were quiet again after the crash, but the silence felt different now. It was heavy, charged, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Ethan stood there, still gripping the alien girl's trembling hand. Her fingers were long, slender, almost fragile, but the grip was surprisingly strong. She was looking at him with those glowing eyes, eyes filled with exhaustion and fear, but also something else. Hope. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had no idea what he was doing. He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a farm boy who fixed tractors and old engines when they broke. And yet, when she had asked for help, he had said yes. Her ship hissed behind them, a wounded beast trying to hold itself together. Sparks leapt from broken wires, and one of the glowing symbols on its side flickered weakly before going dark. The girl looked back at it and winced, as if the ship's pain was her own. She whispered again, her words broken but clear enough. "Ship. Broken. Must fix, please." Ethan nodded slowly. He didn't know the first thing about alien technology, but he knew the look on her face. It was the same look his little sister had given him years ago when she had been hurt and scared, asking him to make things better. It was a look that pierced straight into his chest. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll try." The girl's shoulders eased just slightly, a breath of relief escaping her lips. She swayed on her feet, and Ethan quickly stepped closer to steady her. Her skin felt cool against his arm, but her weight was so light it startled him. She was tired, maybe injured. "You need to sit," Ethan murmured. He guided her gently toward a fallen tree nearby. She didn't resist. She lowered herself onto it, her hands trembling as they rested on her lap. Her glowing eyes never left him. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there looking at the broken ship. He could feel the heat of it against his face. He ran a hand through his messy hair and let out a shaky laugh. "What am I even doing?" he whispered to himself. Then he thought of his father again. His father had always said machines weren't as complicated as people thought. "Every machine," he told Ethan, "has a heart. You find it, you understand it, you fix it." Ethan had lived by those words, repairing rusty tractors and old harvesters with nothing more than tools and patience. Maybe this ship wasn't so different. He walked closer, careful of the sparks. The hull was smooth under his fingers, warm in some places, icy cold in others. The symbols etched into the metal glowed faintly like fading embers. He crouched by one of the broken panels, peering inside. His eyes widened at the sight of wires, coils, and strange glowing tubes. It was all beyond him, yet strangely familiar, like looking at the guts of a machine that wanted to be understood. Behind him, the girl spoke again, her voice weak. "Energies flows. Broken path must restore." Ethan turned to look at her. Her English was broken, but she was trying. He realized she was giving him directions. "Broken path," he repeated softly, glancing back at the wires. He could see it now. One of the glowing tubes had cracked, leaking faint light like spilled liquid. The energy inside wasn't reaching the rest of the system. "I think I get it," he said. He didn't know if she understood all his words, but she watched him closely, as if she believed he could do this. He took a breath and removed his jacket. From the pocket, he pulled out a small multi-tool he always carried. It wasn't much, just a knife, a screwdriver, a pair of pliers. But it had saved him more than once on the farm. He crouched lower, carefully using the pliers to pull at the broken piece. Sparks jumped and he jerked back. The girl gasped softly, her hands tightening on her knees. Ethan glanced at her and gave a small smile. "It's okay. Just a little spark. I'll be careful." Something in his calm voice seemed to ease her. She nodded faintly, her glowing eyes softer now. Ethan tried again, slower this time. He worked with patience, treating the ship as if it were a living thing. Every movement was careful, deliberate. He managed to remove the cracked tube and set it aside, The glow dimmed even more, but he could see where it needed to connect again. He searched the surrounding ground and by some miracle he found another piece, similar though bent from the crash. He cleaned it with his sleeve and adjusted it with his pliers until it almost fit. "Come on," he whispered under his breath, pushing it into place. The moment it slid in, the faint hum of the ship grew louder, like a weak heartbeat finding rhythm again. One of the glowing symbols on the hull brightened just slightly. The girl gasped, her eyes widening. "Yes, yes," she said softly, her voice breaking with relief. Ethan looked back at her and couldn't help but grin. "I told you. Just needed the right piece." She smiled then, small, faint, but real. And in that moment, Ethan forgot all his fear. She wasn't just some strange being from the stars. She was someone who needed him, someone who trusted him. The night stretched on as he worked, making small adjustments, cleaning connections, and listening carefully whenever she gave him guidance. Her voice grew steadier as the ship responded, and though he didn't understand everything she said, they found a rhythm, a way to communicate beyond words. At one point, she whispered, "You, different, you stay. You help. Others would run." Ethan paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. He met her glowing eyes and shook his head. "I couldn't leave you here. Not like this." Her expression softened, and for a long time she just watched him. He could feel her gaze like warmth against his skin. Finally, when the ship's hum grew steady enough to feel alive again, Ethan sat back, exhausted. He let out a long sigh. "That's the best I can do tonight," he said. The girl nodded slowly. She was trembling less now, her breathing calmer. With effort, she stood and took a shaky step toward him. Then, without warning, she placed her hand gently against his chest. Her skin was cool, her touch light, but it carried a weight that made his heart skip. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan froze. The gratitude in her voice, the softness in her glowing eyes, left him speechless. Under the stars, in the middle of a forest filled with smoke and broken metal, a bond had begun to form, a bond neither human nor alien could have expected. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel alone. The forest was quiet again, but it was no longer the same peaceful quiet Ethan had known all his life. Now the silence felt dangerous, as if the trees were holding secrets too big to carry. Smoke still rose faintly from the broken ship, curling between the branches like a signal. Anyone from town could see it if they came this way. Ethan wiped the sweat from his face, his shirt damp, his hands covered in grime from hours of work on the strange vessel. His muscles ached, but his mind was sharper than ever. Every sound made him flinch. He kept glancing toward the dirt path, half expecting headlights or voices to come crashing through the trees. The alien girl sat quietly on the fallen tree where he had placed her earlier. She watched him with calm eyes, though there was still worry in them. Her glowing skin had dimmed to a softer light, like the last shine of the moon before sunrise. She was weak, but there was something unshakable in the way she carried herself, fragile yet strong, like glass hiding steel. "We can't stay here," Ethan finally said, his voice low but firm. "Someone's going to see the smoke. Hunters, rangers, anyone. If they find you, I don't know what they'll do." The girl tilted her head, trying to follow his words. She caught the fear in his tone, and that seemed enough. She nodded slowly, though she looked back at her ship with sorrow. Ship must hide. Must repair. Safe, Ethan understood. She couldn't abandon it, but leaving it in the open was too dangerous. He rubbed his forehead, thinking hard. The barn. The thought hit him suddenly. His father's old barn had stood empty for years now, used only to store tools and broken equipment. It was big enough to hide the smaller pieces of her ship, at least the ones he could move. "I know a place," Ethan said, "but we'll have to work fast." The girl rose slowly, swaying a little. Ethan rushed to her side and steadied her again. She leaned against him for a moment, and he felt the coolness of her skin through his sleeve. She was lighter than she looked, almost too light, as though she was made of something finer than flesh and bone. "You help me," she whispered, her broken English carrying both question and trust. Ethan met her glowing eyes. "Yeah, I'll help you." Together they began moving parts of the wreck. Ethan worked with determination, pulling at broken panels, wires, and glowing tubes. Some were too heavy for him alone, but the girl, despite her weakness, would lift with him, her small frame hiding surprising strength. Each time they carried a piece into the shadowed path toward the farm, Ethan's heart pounded, terrified someone would see them. The walk to the barn was long and difficult. By the time they reached it, sweat poured down Ethan's face and his arms burned. But when he slid open the old wooden doors, relief washed over him. Inside, the barn was dark, dusty and forgotten, perfect for hiding something the world should not see. They placed the first pieces down in the corner, hidden beneath tarps and old tools. The girl touched one panel gently, whispering something in her own language. Her voice was soft, melodic, almost like a lullaby. The broken metal shimmered faintly under her hand. Ethan watched her, his chest tightening. She looked so out of place in his father's barn, like a star fallen into the dust of an ordinary world. And yet somehow she belonged here now. By dawn they had moved as much as they could. The ship in the forest was now just a broken shell, less likely to draw attention. Exhausted, Ethan leaned against the barn wall, breathing hard. The girl sat nearby, her head tilted back, her glowing eyes half closed with fatigue. "You should rest," Ethan said softly. She looked at him, then lowered her gaze, almost shy. "Rest with you?" The words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment he didn't know how to answer. She wasn't asking for anything more than safety, he realized, just not to be left alone. Ethan gave a small smile. "Yeah, I'll stay." He pulled an old blanket from the corner of the barn and offered it to her. She touched it curiously, then wrapped it around her shoulders. She looked smaller then, almost like a child hiding from the world, yet her glowing eyes never left him. As the morning light slipped through the cracks in the barn walls, Ethan dozed lightly, his head resting back against the wooden beams. He kept waking every so often, checking on her. Each time she was still watching him, as if making sure he didn't vanish. When the sun finally climbed higher, the world outside came alive again. Tractors on distant roads, bird song in the trees. But inside the barn, the world felt still, quiet, wrapped in something fragile and sacred. It wasn't long before the sound of voices broke that stillness. Ethan stiffened. From outside, faint but growing clearer, he heard men talking. The words carried across the fields. Hunters. He froze, his blood running cold. If they came closer, if they saw the strange parts hidden in the barn, everything would be over. The girl must have sensed his fear. She touched his hand gently, her cool fingers brushing against his skin. "Hide," she whispered. "Safe." Ethan quickly pulled old tarps over the glowing pieces, shoving tools and broken wood on top. He motioned for her to stay behind the hay bales. She obeyed, crouching low, her glowing skin dimming until she was almost hidden in shadow. The voices outside grew louder. Ethan stepped out of the barn, trying to look calm, his heart hammering in his chest. Two men walked across the edge of the field, rifles slung over their shoulders. "Mornin', Ethan," one of them called. "You see that light in the sky last night? Looked like something came down in the woods." Ethan forced a casual laugh. "Yeah, I saw it. Probably just a meteor. Didn't sound like much." The men nodded, though one of them squinted toward the barn. Ethan's palms sweated. He shifted, blocking the view. "You boys huntin' early?" he asked quickly. "Yeah," the other said. "Deer have been moving out this way. You take care now." Ethan nodded stiffly. Only when the men turned and walked away did he finally let out the breath he'd been holding. He leaned against the barn door, his chest aching from the effort of staying calm. Inside, the girl slowly rose from her hiding place. Her glowing eyes studied him, soft and full of something he couldn't name. She stepped closer and placed her hand over his heart. "You protect," she whispered. Ethan looked down at her, at the fragile strength in her face, and for once, he didn't feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. He felt chosen. For the first time in years, he wasn't just living. He was fighting for something, someone that mattered. And in that quiet barn, with dust drifting in the sunlight, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He would protect her, no matter what it cost. The barn became their secret world. Days passed slowly, hidden beneath the wooden beams and the smell of hay and dust. Ethan spent his mornings working on the farm as usual, pretending nothing had changed, and his evenings inside the barn with the strange girl from the stars. At first, their conversations were simple, broken English from her, patient words from him. But slowly, like the ship pieces they carefully repaired together, her voice grew steadier. She picked up words quickly, repeating them softly until they belonged to her tongue. Sometimes, when she struggled, she would tilt her head with frustration, and Ethan couldn't help but laugh gently. His laughter always made her smile, faint but bright, as if she was glad she could make him happy. She had told him her name on the second night. At least she tried. The sound was soft and musical, something his mouth couldn't quite shape. After several tries, she gave a little shake of her head and whispered, "Call me Lyra." "Lyra," Ethan repeated, tasting the name like a secret. She nodded, her glowing eyes warming at the sound of it. Ethan learned quickly that she wasn't just a lost traveler. She was running from something. She hadn't told him everything at first, just fragments. Words like pursued, danger, and must hide. Each time she spoke of it, her voice grew softer, as if shadows pressed on her shoulders. Ethan didn't push her. He only listened. One evening, as the sun dipped low and golden light spilled through the barn's cracks, Ethan worked on a glowing panel while Lyra sat nearby, wrapping the old blanket around her shoulders. She had been quiet that night, her glowing eyes distant, staring at the dust floating in the air. Finally, she whispered, "You wonder why I am here." Ethan set his tool down and looked at her. "I've been wondering, yeah," he admitted gently. "But I didn't want to force you to tell me." Her lips curved faintly. You are kind." She lowered her gaze. "My people, they fight, always fight. I do not want war." Ethan leaned forward, listening closely. "I was to be given," she continued, struggling with the words, "given to them. To leaders who use me, my ship." I ran. Her voice trembled and she clutched the blanket tighter. Ethan's chest tightened as he pieced it together. She wasn't just lost, she was escaping. She had run from her own people, from something dark and cruel. "You didn't want to be a part of it," Ethan said softly. She looked at him then, her glowing eyes shining with a sorrow so deep it nearly broke him. "I wanted freedom. I wanted to touch stars, not chains." Ethan swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. He thought of his own life, the weight of the farm, the loss of his father, the feeling of being trapped in a place too small for dreams. He had never imagined running from soldiers or wars, but he understood the hunger for freedom. He understood it too well. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "No one will find you. Not while I'm here." Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool and light, but her gaze carried all the weight of her soul. "You mean this?" "With everything I've got," Ethan whispered. She smiled then, a fragile smile, trembling like a candle flame. "You are strange, Ethan, strong, but gentle, different." The words struck him deeper than he expected. No one had ever looked at him like that, not since his father had passed, not since his sister had left. For so long, he had been just another farm boy holding a life together, but in her eyes he was something more. The nights grew warmer with her presence. They shared food in secret, Ethan sneaking bread, fruit, and water from the house, placing them on a wooden crate like an offering. Lyra would eat slowly, curiously, tasting each piece as if it was a treasure. The first time she bit into an apple, her eyes widened in delight. She whispered, "Sweet?" as though the word itself was magic. Ethan laughed. "Glad you like it." Sometimes she asked him about Earth. He told her about cornfields stretching to the horizon, about thunderstorms rolling across the plains, about children laughing at county fairs. She listened like each word was a jewel, her glowing eyes wide with wonder. Other times, she told him little fragments of her world, oceans of silver water, skies that shimmered with two suns, cities carved into mountains that floated above the ground. Ethan would sit there, spellbound, as her broken English painted pictures of places he could barely imagine. But not all her stories were beautiful. Some nights, when the barn was dark and quiet, she spoke of the soldiers who had hunted her, of the leaders who wanted to use her. Her voice would break then, and she would fall silent, staring at the floor. Ethan never pressed her. Instead, he would move closer, sitting beside her in the straw, his shoulder brushing hers. He didn't have grand words to offer, but he had presence, and sometimes that was enough. One night, a storm rolled in. The wind howled through the fields, and rain battered the roof of the barn. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the hidden ship parts with quick bursts of silver light. Lyra flinched at the thunder, her glowing eyes wide with fear. Ethan moved quickly, sitting beside her. "It's just a storm," he said softly. "It won't hurt you." She looked at him, uncertain. Another crack of thunder shook the barn, and she pressed closer, her small hands gripping his arm tightly. Her cool skin made him shiver, but he didn't pull away. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders instead, holding her steady. "Safe," he whispered. "I've got you." For a long time she stayed like that, pressed against him as the storm raged outside. And when her trembling finally eased, she whispered so softly he almost missed it. "You. First human I touch. First I trust." Ethan's heart nearly stopped. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of galaxies. He looked down at her, at the way her glowing eyes reflected the stormlight, and he realized something that terrified him. She wasn't just a visitor he was protecting. She was becoming part of him. When the storm faded into silence, Lyra finally closed her eyes and leaned against him, asleep at last. Ethan stayed awake, listening to the rain, his chest aching with something he couldn't name. He had promised to protect her. But deep inside, he knew the truth. He wasn't just protecting her anymore, she was protecting him, too. Protecting him from the emptiness that had followed him for years. The quiet of the barn could not last forever. For days, Ethan and Lyra worked in silence, repairing small parts of the ship, whispering stories, sharing food in secret. But the world outside the farm was beginning to stir. People had seen the streak of fire in the sky that night. Some claimed it was a meteor. Others swore it was a plane going down. And rumors spread quickly in small towns. One morning, while Ethan carried a bucket of water from the well, he overheard two men talking on the road nearby. "They say some government folks are coming down here," one said. "Looking for something that fell." "Figures," the other muttered. "You don't get a fireball that big without somebody wanting answers." Ethan's stomach tightened. He lowered the bucket and walked back to the barn with heavy steps. Inside, Lyra sat cross-legged on the straw, her glowing hands resting on a half-repaired panel. She looked up at him immediately, reading the tension on his face before he spoke a word. "What?" she asked softly. Ethan knelt down in front of her. "They're looking, people, the government. If they get close, they'll find the ship. They'll find you." Her glowing eyes flickered with fear, but only for a moment. Then she straightened, her voice calm though her hands trembled. "You decide what we do." Ethan's chest tightened. She trusted him completely, and that trust felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. That night he moved the last of the ship's glowing pieces deeper into the barn, covering them with hay, old tarps, and broken wood. He worked until sweat dripped into his eyes, until his arms ached. Lyra helped where she could, her slender hands surprisingly steady as she guided the fragile wires into safer positions. "You work so hard," she whispered once when he paused to catch his breath. He gave her a tired smile. "Because you're worth it." She blinked, her glowing eyes wide, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then she lowered her head, whispering something in her own language, soft, like a prayer. The next day, the danger grew closer. Trucks rolled through town, carrying men in uniforms Ethan didn't recognize. They knocked on doors, asked questions, walked through the fields with sharp eyes. Some locals followed them, curious, whispering about meteors and strange lights. Ethan kept to himself, but his heart never stopped racing. At night he would lie awake in the barn, listening for the sound of footsteps outside. Lyra stayed hidden. Her glowing skin dimmed until she looked almost like an ordinary shadow in the hay. One evening, while the sun set in fiery red, Ethan heard footsteps approaching the barn. His body went cold. He quickly motioned for Lyra to hide, and she slipped silently behind the hay bales. The barn door creaked open and a tall man stepped inside. He wore a plain jacket, but his sharp eyes and careful movements told Ethan he wasn't just some curious neighbor. "Evening," the man said smoothly. "You mind if I take a look around? Folks said they saw some smoke in this direction." Ethan forced himself to stay calm. "Just an old barn," he said, his voice steady though his heart thundered. "Been falling apart for years. You won't find anything here." The man stepped further inside, scanning the dark corners. Ethan moved casually, blocking the path toward the hidden ship parts. "Barn's a mess," he added quickly. "Watch your step." The man's eyes lingered on him for a long moment, sharp and unblinking. Then finally he gave a small nod. "If you see anything strange, you let us know." Ethan nodded, keeping his face neutral. Only when the man left did Ethan's knees nearly give out. He leaned against the wall, his chest burning from holding his breath. Lyra emerged from the shadows, her eyes wide with worry. She touched his arm, her cool fingers trembling. Danger, close, Ethan nodded. Yeah, too close. That night as they sat in the dark barn, Ethan looked at her and whispered, "We can't stay here forever. They're not going to stop looking." She met his gaze, her glowing eyes soft but firm. "I must repair ship. Then leave. For your world." Safe, her words pierced him. Of course she had to leave. She didn't belong here. She had a sky full of stars waiting for her, but the thought of her leaving made something ache deep inside him. A hollow he hadn't felt since losing his father. He didn't say it out loud, but he already knew he didn't want her to go. The days grew tighter, filled with tension and whispered conversations. They worked faster on the ship pieces, though Ethan often found himself staring at her instead of the wires. The way she tilted her head when she didn't understand a word. The way her smile lit her whole face when she learned something new. The way her glowing eyes softened whenever they landed on him. One evening, as they shared a piece of bread and an apple, Lyra spoke softly. "When I go, will you remember me?" Ethan nearly choked on the bread. He looked at her, his chest heavy. "Lyra, I could never forget you." She tilted her head, studying him. "Why?" "Because you're different," he said honestly. "Because you've changed me. My life was small before you came, empty. You made it more." For a long moment she just stared at him, her glowing eyes shining with something he couldn't name. Then slowly she reached out and touched his cheek. Her cool hand lingered there, soft but steady. "You more too," she whispered. "To me." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight. He didn't know what to say. He only knew that in that quiet barn, with her hand on his face, the world outside, the uniforms, the rumors, the danger, felt distant, but deep inside, he knew it wouldn't stay away for long. The world was closing in, and soon he would have to make a choice, to let her go, or to fight against everything to keep her safe. And Ethan already knew which one his heart was leaning toward. The days had grown heavy with silence. Ethan and Lyra worked faster, knowing their time was short. Each sound outside the barn made them freeze. Each knock on a neighbor's door reminded Ethan that the search was moving closer. But nothing prepared him for the night it finally happened. It was late, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. Lyra had just finished connecting a glowing panel, and for the first time part of the ship flickered back to life. A faint hum filled the barn, low and steady like a heartbeat. Ethan's chest lifted with hope. "We're close," he whispered. Lyra gave him a small smile, her glowing eyes bright. Soon, ready. But then headlights swept across the field. Engines growled. Tires crushed gravel. Ethan's blood went cold. He rushed to the barn door and peered through a crack. Black trucks. At least 4 of them. Men in dark uniforms stepped out, carrying flashlights and equipment. They spread quickly like wolves hunting in silence. "They're here," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. Lyra froze, her eyes wide, the glow in her skin dimming in fear. "Ethan," she said softly, almost like his name was the only safe thing she could cling to. He turned back to her, his chest tight. "We don't have time. The ship isn't ready yet." She shook her head, trembling. "I cannot fight. If they catch, I will be taken." Ethan looked at her, this fragile being who had trusted him, who had given him purpose again, and something deep inside him hardened. "Then they won't take you." He grabbed an old hunting rifle from behind the barn wall, his father's gun. He hadn't touched it in years, but tonight it felt heavy and alive in his hands. The men were already approaching the barn. Flashlights cut through the dark, sweeping across the fields. Ethan's heart pounded, but he pushed the fear down. He looked back at Lyra. "Stay hidden, no matter what happens. Don't come out until I tell you." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "Ethan, don't," he forced a smile. "I have to. You deserve to see the stars again." She shook her head, whispering something in her own language, but he turned before his heart could break. The barn doors rattled as heavy boots approached. A voice called out, "Open up! We know something fell here." Ethan stood in the shadows, gripping the rifle. His hands trembled, but he lifted the barrel, aiming at the door. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, boy. It's standing anyway." The doors creaked open. A flashlight beam swept inside. "Hands where I can see them." A man barked. Ethan stepped into the light, the rifle steady in his hands. "This is private land," he said firmly. "You're not welcome here. The men hesitated. They hadn't expected resistance. One of them narrowed his eyes. "We know something fell." "A craft, where is it?" Ethan's voice was calm, though his chest burned. "I don't know what you're talking about. And even if I did, you're not taking it," the man sneered. "Step aside, kid. You don't know what you're protecting, but Ethan did know. He was protecting more than a ship. He was protecting her." When the first man stepped forward, Ethan fired a shot into the dirt at his feet. The crack of the gun shattered the night. The men froze, startled. "Back off," Ethan growled. For a moment, silence, then chaos. The men surged forward and Ethan fired again, forcing them to scatter. Shouts filled the night. A flashlight beam smashed against the wall as one of the men tried to rush him. Ethan swung the rifle like a club, knocking the man back. Boots thundered against the barn floor. Ethan stumbled, but his body moved with raw instinct. He swung, shoved, pushed with everything he had. His chest burned, his arms ached, but he refused to fall. Behind him, he heard the faint hum of the ship, the sound of Lyra working desperately. She hadn't stopped. She was still fighting in her own way. One man managed to grab Ethan by the collar, slamming him against the wall. The breath left his chest in a painful gasp. But then through the corner of his eye, Ethan saw Lyra. She had stepped out of hiding. Her glowing hands were raised, trembling but bright. And in that moment, she looked like more than a fragile girl. She looked like something unearthly, something strong. A wave of light burst from her hands, washing through the barn. The men cried out, stumbling, covering their eyes. The flashlights went dark. Ethan dropped to his knees, blinking through the glow. Lyra was on the ground, her body shaking, the light fading from her hands. She had used everything she had left. The men, blinded and confused, scrambled back toward the trucks. Shouts turned into curses. Engines roared. Tires spun in the dirt, and within moments they were gone, retreating into the night, too shaken to continue. The barn was silent again, except for the soft hum of the ship. Ethan crawled to Lyra's side. She was weak, her skin pale, her glow dim. He lifted her gently, his arms trembling. "Lyra," he whispered, his throat tight. "Stay with me, please." Her eyes fluttered open, faintly glowing. She gave him a small, tired smile. "You protect me." Tears stung his eyes. "Always," he said. She touched his cheek with shaking fingers. "Soon a ship ready. But Ethan, if I go, you safe?" He shook his head fiercely, his voice breaking. "I don't care about safe. I care about you." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the human and the alien girl, both broken, both exhausted, but both still alive. Outside, the night was quiet again. But inside, something had changed. The fight was no longer just about repairing a ship. It was about holding on to something neither of them wanted to lose. And Ethan knew that when the time came, he would do more than fight for her. He would choose her, no matter the cost. The barn smelled of smoke and dust after the fight. Broken boards lay scattered, and the air was thick with silence. Ethan sat on the floor with Lyra cradled against him, her skin faintly glowing in the dark. His arms were wrapped around her as if letting go would mean losing her forever. She was weak. Too weak. The blast of light she had released had drained her more than she admitted. Her breathing was shallow, each rise and fall of her chest making Ethan's heart twist tighter. "You'll be okay," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "You're going to be okay." Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "Ethan, always say." Strong words, his throat burned. "Because I need you to believe them." For a long time they stayed like that, their world reduced to the quiet of the broken barn. But then faintly the hum of the ship grew louder. The repairs they had worked on, the wires, the panels, the pieces carefully hidden, had finally come together. Sparks of light ran along its surface. A pulse echoed, steady and alive. Lyra stirred, her glowing eyes flickering open. She looked at the ship and then at him. "Ready," she whispered. "It will fly." Ethan's chest tightened. The words he had been dreading. He should have been happy. He had promised her safety. He had worked night after night, risking everything to repair her ship. And now at last she could go home, but the thought of her leaving left him hollow. "You'll leave tonight?" he asked softly. She reached up, her cool hand brushing his cheek. "Yes, they will come back. I must go. Before they take you too." His jaw tightened. "I don't care what happens to me. He stopped, the words choking him. But she saw them anyway. She always did, her glowing eyes softened. Ethan, my first friend. My only friend here. He swallowed hard, forcing a shaky smile. And you're my... everything. Her hand lingered on his face, trembling. I never knew. Human heart so strong. The next hours were quiet, filled with work. Ethan helped her gather the last pieces, fitting them into the ship. Every bolt he tightened felt like a countdown. Every wire connected was one step closer to goodbye. His chest grew heavier, but he kept going because he knew this was what she needed. When the last panel locked in place, the ship came alive. The silver hull glowed faintly, smooth and whole once more. A soft hum filled the barn, wrapping around them like a heartbeat. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes glowing brighter now. She looked stronger, though still fragile. "It is time," she whispered. Ethan stared at the ship, then at her. His chest ached, but he nodded. Yeah, time. They walked to the ship together. The barn doors were pushed open and the night sky stretched wide above them. Clouds had cleared and stars glittered like diamonds. It felt like the universe itself was watching. Lyra turned to him. Her hands, small and cool, reached for his. He took them without hesitation. "I want to give you something," she said softly. He frowned. "You don't have to." But she shook her head, her eyes glowing with quiet determination. "I must. You gave me life. You gave me trust. I cannot leave without giving back." Before he could answer, she leaned closer. Her lips brushed against his forehead, gentle and cool, leaving behind a faint shimmer of light. Ethan's breath caught. His skin tingled where she touched him and warmth spread through his chest, deeper than anything he had ever felt. When she pulled back, her glowing eyes were wet with tears. "Now part of me, always with you." Ethan's throat closed. He wanted to beg her to stay. He wanted to tell her he didn't care about the stars, that all he needed was her. But he saw the truth in her eyes. She didn't belong here. She had a world beyond his own, a destiny bigger than this small farm. So instead he nodded even though his heart broke. "Go," he whispered. "Find your stars. Be free." She lingered for one last moment, staring at him as though memorizing every line of his face. Then slowly she stepped into the ship. The door closed with a soft hiss. The ship glowed brighter, humming louder. Ethan stepped back, shielding his eyes as the light grew, and then with a low roar the ship lifted. Dust and straw swirled around him, the ground trembling beneath his boots. The barn's roof split as the vessel rose higher and higher, breaking through the night sky. Ethan stood there, his heart pounding, his eyes wet. He watched until the silver glow became a distant star, until it vanished into the endless dark. The farm was silent again. The barn was broken and empty, and Ethan stood alone under the sky. For a long time he didn't move. His chest ached, but then something stirred inside him, a warmth, a light. He placed his hand against his chest, and there it was, the shimmer she had left behind glowing faintly under his skin. Her gift. Her reward, not gold, not jewels, not anything the world could measure. It was her. A piece of her heart beating inside him. And in that moment, Ethan understood he hadn't lost her. Not really. She was with him always. In the stars above, in the light within him, in every breath he took. He looked up at the sky, whispering into the night, "Thank you, Lyra." And for the first time since his father's death, Ethan felt whole again. The world would keep searching, keep asking questions, keep chasing the fire that fell from the sky. But Ethan knew the truth was his alone. He had repaired her starship. But she had repaired something far greater, his heart, and that was the reward that left him speechless.